Um, Good morning, Anne. Today we have a conversation with Anne Fry. Anne is an international specialist on the transport needs of disabled and older people. She advises public, commercial, and professional bodies on policy solutions to meet mobility needs in all transport modes and in the pedestrian environment, and has led projects for the United Nations, the European Commission, and the European Science Foundation on access standards and best practice. She has also advised governments and transport authorities in Canada, Hong Kong, Australia, New Zealand, and Ireland. She is currently Senior Expert Transport for the Accessible EU Centre and is working with Fundación ONCE on delivering best practice in accessible mobility across UE member states. We think your knowledge about accessibility and older people always bring new perspectives. So, having a global view of accessibility in different European countries, which countries pay the most attention to accessibility and in which subjects, in your opinion?
It's a difficult question, and it risks upsetting everybody. If we're looking just at Europe, I would say that Spain is probably leading. I would, of course, have to say that that's a lot of the work of Fundación ONCE and of organizations like yourselves. What I see in Spain is engagement with disabled and older people from the very beginning of projects, and that's what makes such a huge difference. So too many countries are following the rules, but without understanding what the rules mean and without understanding about engagement with the people whose needs they should be addressing. If we look globally, I think Japan, if you look at older people, Japan is probably one of the global leaders, not least because their population is aging faster than the rest of the world. They have, I think, the world's first officially aged population. But they do a lot in Japan to integrate, to make sure that older people are engaged in communities, that they're not isolated, that they're not left behind. I particularly like some of the work they do, bringing older people into playgroups with small children to share knowledge and skills. So there's a greater respect, I think, in Japan for older people. In some countries in Europe, I think we see older people a little bit being forgotten, being left behind. The great rush to technology, I think, can sometimes be excluding of older people.
What are the benefits you think of having in mind older people when you implement accessibility measures? What does this perspective brings into society?
Well, it includes everybody, and I think there is nothing that older people need that doesn't benefit everybody else. So I think if we start with the needs of older people, perhaps for more time to get across the road, for more understanding of how to interact with technology, and always remembering that it's the human element that is the most important. I think all of us, when we travel, particularly if we travel long distance or internationally, we are anxious, and anxiety makes us less skilled, less competent, and for many older people that level of anxiety is much higher. And in many ways, I think we're making it worse by relying on technology to the exclusion of human interaction. So many places now, you need an app. Apps are wonderful, particularly for people with low vision and so on. Of course, they're great, but not everybody can use them. If you look at the ownership of smartphones, it's very low, even among the over 50s, which I find very surprising, but it is. So by saying, oh, you can use the app, you can use the touch screen, you can do all of these things, actually no, many people can't. And even those who do perhaps have the technology anxiety is a strong barrier to independent mobility. So I know from years back in the UK, we did research with older people on the transport system. The one thing above all that they wanted was the presence of uniformed staff. So they could be standing under the clock that said 4 o'clock, next train 5 minutes. They still wanted to turn to somebody and say, is this the train that I need? So it's that reassurance that I think we all benefit from when we travel. And for older people, it is very often essential if they're going to travel at all.
Mm-hmm. Just for curiosity, you mentioned Japan. Japan being such a technological country, do they as well take care of older people in that sense of just lowering down a bit the level of technology?
They do. I think there is an understanding there that technology can solve many problems, but it can actually also create many problems. And it certainly doesn't solve everybody's problems. So, yes, there is a level of understanding in Japan. And just to take one European example, in Finland, there is a legal code that says that every app that is produced for travel must have a telephone service to back it up. So if I want to book a ride and I can't use my app, I can phone, I can speak to a real human being. And that is a legal requirement in Finland under their code. And I think that's excellent. And I think in too many cases, we're forgetting that. Everything goes digital and you forget that you're leaving a lot of people behind.
Mm-hmm. Santiago?
Yes, I was thinking about what you say. We may fall in an old mistake that is think that one solution is suitable for everybody, and it's not the case. No, always the personal interaction. It's in most cases the choice that is preferable for many people. Mm-hmm. Going back to the first question, without put you into a trouble, besides Spain, which countries do you highlight that are who pays more attention in Europe? Or in which subjects, but because maybe in one country there is a need that is on the spotlight, and in other country is other one.
I think, sadly, I don't think I can point to any country that is doing everything correctly. It differs not just between countries, but also between regions, and so much depends on local politics, on local authorities, on the way that the town or the city or the rural area is put together. As I said before, what I see in Spain is a good level of engagement with people with disabilities and with older people right from the concept. What I've just been looking at quite recently is some very good work in parts of France, in Lorient, in Rennes, which is wayfinding and mapping of pedestrian environments on the basis that if you can't get to the bus stop, you can't get on the bus. And in many cases, I think we've focused on individual bits of the journey. So the train is accessible, the bus is accessible. But actually, if I'm an older person or a blind person, how do I find my way to where to catch the bus or to find the station? So there's some very good mapping of routes in particular cities in France, which enable you, again, it's an app, but there are human interfaces there too. It enables you to plot a route that is wheelchair accessible, to plot a route if you have low vision. This kind of development, I think, can be extremely helpful, and that seems to be pioneering in France, and I've been very happy to see that. In the UK, we are, I think, doing quite well on a lot of these issues. There is a strong movement to engage with older people and people with disabilities in co-creation, co-design. So again, making sure that we don't make the mistakes that we so often see of introducing a lovely new system and then saying to older and disabled people, haven't we done a great job? Well, no, you haven't, because you've forgotten this. And it's too easy to think you know the answers without asking the questions. And I think certainly in the UK now, in airports, in stations, in railway companies, there are panels of older and disabled people who are there by law and who are engaged in every discussion of new systems and planning. And that, I think, is extremely helpful. I have to say that's also in European law, certainly for air travel, but I'm not actually seeing it in too many countries in practice. And I think that's something we need to pay more attention to.
In Spain, I don't know, I'm sure it happens in all the countries you know as well, but we have that perspective of having, of focusing accessibility 360 degrees. So it means that we implement accessibility in all the organizations, in all the areas of the organizations, and in all the perspectives of accessibility. Have you some experience concerning that you can bring to us? Like, is it being done in the UK or in other countries in Europe that you know?
I would say it's a great idea. It's the right way forward. I think actually Spain is leading in this. What we are beginning to see, and I think it starts with training, is to make sure that not just the people in the front line of delivering assistance to disabled people are trained, but the chairman of the board, the managing director, everybody, right down to the people who are sweeping the floor and cleaning the toilets. They all need training. They all need to engage in what's happening. And certainly in the UK, we're trying to roll that out, for example, at airports, so that the training, if you're serving coffee in the cafe at the airport, you still need to know, if I have a customer who's in a wheelchair, how do I hand them a cup of hot coffee without them spilling it and all the problems? So, and if I'm cleaning the toilets, how do I know that I don't put my mops and buckets blocking access to the toilet? Everybody needs that training and, if you like, capacity building. And I think that's fundamental. What I've seen, though, in Spain, and again, just at a recent event in Paris, talking to Alstom, who build many of the trains in your metro systems and mainline rail, is the engagement right from the outset in understanding not just the physical design, but issues such as dignity. They were talking, for example, about when a wheelchair user gets on a metro, for example, they have to indicate that they're there. They're made to feel a little bit awkward. You know, I'm creating a delay. And then there is now a new system where cameras on the station will automatically detect that there's a wheelchair user waiting to board, will alert the driver that there's a wheelchair user, and the driver will do whatever is necessary. So you've removed, if you like, the feeling of stigma that some wheelchair users have using public transport. You've addressed the issue of dignity, and I think that's hugely important, and that's something that is so often missing. You know, we have accessible buses and trains, but you have to push the button, you have to wait for somebody to open the door, maybe somebody to put out a ramp. You're made to feel that you're a burden, and that's a big disincentive for many people to travel. So I think that is a huge benefit and advance. And I also think now we're much more conscious of neurodiversity. Even 10 years ago, and certainly back when I was first working in this field, we were very focused on wheelchairs, on blind people, on hearing loss. We didn't really understand or recognize the whole issue of neurodiversity. And I think now we're beginning to see much more planning and design of transport systems that recognize, again, anxiety is at the heart of it, whether it's autism or dementia or whatever the diagnosis, if you like. We don't need to talk about that, but the end result is anxiety. So addressing the needs of people who are anxious when they travel, I think, is a huge breakthrough, and we're beginning to see that. Certainly in the UK now, there is a standard called Design for the Mind, which is all about designing the stress out of public buildings, including transport environment. So, you know, the more you can think about what are we doing to enable people to travel with dignity, but also without stress. Because, as I said before, we all feel that to a greater or lesser extent, but for many people, it becomes a traumatic issue and means they can't travel at all. So I think that's a very good development that we're seeing more and more widely now.
I just a comment, but I always think that older people are very good representatives of that neurodiversity, no? Because you can be a bit deaf, you can be a bit short-sighted, you can be having trouble with mobility. So I always think that having in mind old people in the way you express things, in the way you design things, it's a very good starting key, no? Starting point, starting.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you're completely right, because nobody has, you know, just one issue. The older you get, the more things will affect you. And all of those things, whether it's not quite such sharp vision or acute hearing, they all affect your confidence, and maybe frightened of steps and stairs, of tripping and falling. I mean, we do know that one of the biggest reasons why older people give up, stop going out independently, is a fear of falling. And that it may not be that they've actually had a fall, but maybe a friend or a neighbour or something they read in the newspaper. And what we're seeing now across Europe, actually, is the e-scooters and the e-bikes, which are creating anxiety for many older people in particular, and people with vision loss, because they tend to be dropped, dumped, abandoned, so they become a hazard on the pavement, and they are also being ridden silently. You know, this is an interesting dilemma. Great technology, non-polluting, electric, but there's no sound. And for older people, the fear of something coming up at speed behind them is very great. So I know that quite a number of older people are now too frightened to go out, even to their local shops, for fear of somebody on an electric bike who's not bothering to stop, who's not indicating that they're there. So we're in some ways, we're creating a more difficult environment with the technology that is meant to be greener and better. So we have to watch all the time that we haven't got, we're not out of balance, if you like, with needs.
Yes, I would like to remark what you say about confidence, because the complexity of our societies increases, the mobility complexity increases too. So I think that is very important for people from every ages, but we are talking about older people now, but to feel that confidence to go out, to move freely, to don't have to depend on other people to do it. So I think that it's a perspective that we have to add, not the psychological perspective in the accessibility, no? Because if we feel insecure, we feel fear, we are not going to move. It's the first thing that arrives is to paralyze, no? So
absolutely. And we know that what happens when an older person stops going out independently, it's a huge cost to them personally at a social level, but it's also a huge cost economically, because they will become dependent on other people to help, to provide things for them. If their medical care has to come to them at home because they can't get out to see their doctor, the lighting is not so good, the hygiene is not so good, the range of equipment is not so good, so their healthcare suffers. We also know that their nutrition suffers, because if you go to a local shop, you can say, oh, those oranges look good today, or that bread looks nice. If you're relying on somebody to do it for you, you'll just say, oh, I just need milk and bread. And we have research evidence that the nutritional well-being falls because of that. I know many years ago I spoke at a conference of chiropodists, you know, the people who look after your feet, particularly older people, and they remarked that the point at which an older person stops putting on their shoes and spends all day in their slippers is the point that triggers a very rapid decline in both physical and mental health, because your horizons close in. So, you know, I think we need to be very conscious of the consequences of not tackling the anxiety that older people feel when they go out.
Very interesting point that you're highlighted now. Christina, you continue with the next question, I think.
Yeah, well, we have talked about cognitive accessibility, concerning information, environment, wayfinding, design, and products, etc. Do you think that concerning the European Accessibility Act, will it be taken into account all this perspective of access to information in the broad sense of the word, in environment, in products, in information, texts, etc.? Do you think that it will be paid attention?
It's early days. It's only been in force since June. I think it's a very important piece of legislation. At the moment, I think there is a great lack of awareness and understanding. I've talked in the last few months to some of the European airport groups, for example, who were not aware what it meant, what they had to do, what the significance was. So I think it's a huge education process that needs to go on. And it will also be critical for the national authorities to be monitoring and enforcing. And as you know, the regime to monitor and enforce is in the hands of each national authority. So the level of intervention varies greatly. In some countries, there is a huge fine if the providers are not doing it correctly. In others, probably not so much. So we have a long way to go. And of course, it only applies to new equipment and systems. So I think there was such excitement about the Act coming in, we somehow thought everything is going to change very quickly. And of course it isn't. It's only when new, whether it's touchscreen machines, ticket machines, whatever it might be, only when they're renewed do we have to deal with this. So I think a lot more work needs to be done before we start to see the benefits of it. But I think it is nonetheless an important step. And I think if you look at, for example, at ticket machines in metro stations, if you travel around Europe or around the world, almost always you stand in front of the machine and you think, I have no idea. You know, there's just a whole array of buttons and screens, and you think, oh gosh, there's people behind me who are in a hurry. I don't know where I put my money. I don't know which button to press. I've always used the story I was given, and I hope it's true, about the Barcelona metro, where they involved blind people in redesigning the ticket machines so that they are intuitive to use. And I think that kind of approach, you know, again, we were saying earlier about co-creation. If you don't ask the engineer to design the ticket machine, because it will all be about how easy is it to maintain, replace the ink or whatever you do in machines. If you start with the end user and somebody who is blind or has a learning disability, if you want to buy a ticket, how would it work for you? And I think then, so designing from the ground up, so to speak, we will then find, as they did in Barcelona, that all the tourists suddenly could understand how the ticket machine worked without having to ask for help. So again, everybody benefits, but you really need to not engage the people who already know how it works. Start with the end user.
So, sorry, Santiago, just a remark. From what you're saying, it's not very common that end users or more vulnerable users are put in the process of designing, of creating, of managing, of maintaining. They are not, they don't count with them, from what you were saying.
I think we're much better now at engaging them in the design of the bus or the train, but much less good at engaging them in the technology. So, and that's where the Accessibility Act comes in. We need to engage people in designing the interface. You know, how do I get a ticket, whether I'm trying to book online, or who do I speak to? All of that side of things, I think, needs a lot more attention. And I think engaging older people right from the outset of the implementation of the Act, I think, is going to be vital.
One thing that you said that I think that is very interesting regarding the tickets machine for transport and the information is that many times it happens that there are information that is took for granted, that the things that everybody knows, which categories, so maybe they don't take account on what is the very difficult for someone that is maybe simply not familiarized with those kind of transport or its dynamics, maybe because you are new, because you are from other city, even in the same country, but you have differences that are cultural differences in the way the transport is used.
Absolutely. So, I think that's hugely important. Again, that's why I say don't let the engineers anywhere near it. Ask the end user. And I would say the same about the design of big transport environments like railway stations, like airports. Wayfinding is generally terrible because it's done by the people who work in the airport. I would say don't let the people working in the airport anywhere near it. Bring a complete stranger to the front door and say, okay, what's the first thing you want to be able to find? It might be the toilets because you've perhaps had a long journey to get there. It might be the bag drop or the platform or whatever it might be. But you need if you like, a hierarchy of wayfinding that takes account of what people want to find. You often think in airports, for example, there's just signage everywhere. And a lot of confusion over things. And the things you can see best are advertising duty-free because they're always big letters and yellow and black, where actually I want to find where's the information desk? Where do I go? What do I do? So I think for the transport providers to put themselves in the shoes of the least confident person is the best way to address a lot of these needs, whether it's the ticket machine or just the signage and wayfinding around the building.
One thing is, that I would like to ask is, being the European Accessibility Act a directive concerning the rules of common market in European Union for some products and services, do you believe that its implementation will be stronger or faster than with other right-based laws? Because this is a common market law, it's not a right-based law.
That's a very interesting question, and I think it's actually too early to tell. I think it should do, because the people who design and build the technology, as you say, it's a common market. So we ought to start seeing the accessible, compliant products available right across the board. So I would hope that that's a good way of doing it. I mean, rights are hugely important, but it shouldn't be left every time to somebody to bang on the table and say, I have a right to this. It should be being delivered because that's the right way to do it. I mean, if we take, going way back now, the example of low-floor buses. 25, 30 years ago, there were no low-floor buses around Europe. And then I think the Netherlands were the first people to introduce them. And I remember at that time working in government in the UK, and I said, we need to try these look great. And the bus operators in the UK said, oh, no hills in the Netherlands, it's fine where it's flat, wouldn't work here, too many hills, not going to happen. And in the end, we persuaded the Dutch to lend us some low-floor buses to try in the UK, and miraculously they went up hills. And what we found was that everybody got on and off the bus faster. So it wasn't just because they were accessible for the first time. You know, people with shopping, with baby buggies, everybody was on and off faster. So better solution. And gradually the whole climate changed. So I don't think anywhere in Europe now you could buy a bus that is not low floor. It's absolutely the norm. But we had to go through that learning process, if you like, to demonstrate that it is better for everybody. We even found in one example where we were trialing the buses, somebody moving house, they were getting their armchair onto the bus and taking it along, and then they were moving the next piece of furniture. So just because it was easy to manage. So that sort of transformation, I think, is very important. And we need to read that across. If we start to see that the only technology available for a ticket machine is accessible technology, then it will start to roll a lot faster and better.
According, oh, sorry.
No. Santiago, go on.
Yes, according to your experience, I would like to know your opinion about what you think is the next challenge regarding accessibility on a European level.
Oh, again, a very big question. I think we touched on rights a few minutes ago, and I think there is still an issue that many people do not know their rights. They don't know what they should expect, and so bad practice and poor delivery is too common because people don't challenge it. That's one of the things we're trying to do with Accessible EU. We've just launched free online training on transport, among other topics, which is all about rights and about good practice. So helping people to understand, that if they're not finding accessible facilities and services in their country, it's illegal, and they have the right to challenge that. And here's how you go about challenging it. Having said which, the mechanisms for challenging bad practice and illegal practice vary between countries, and it is often quite difficult. I know in air travel, for example, it's the Civil Aviation Authority in each country who are responsible for ensuring that passenger rights are recognized. But the level of intervention, the level of support, the process for making a complaint or recognizing your needs it varies hugely and is still quite difficult and still fragmented. So I think there's a lot more that needs to be done, really to empower people, if you like, to say, I'm sorry, I have a right in law to this service and I'm not getting it, and that needs to be challenged.
Okay, I think we have gone through our time. So, Santiago, if you want to say the last words.
Yes, I think that, I would like to thank Anne. It's not the first time that you kindly participate with CIAPAD, and it has been a privilege and a pleasure having you today with us once more. People like you with so much experience behind, you always are a safe bet for the spreading of technical knowledge, so we are very, very thankful to you.
It's a pleasure. I'm so sorry I can't be with you in person at your event, but I wish you success and very happy to continue the dialogue at any time. Thank you.
I feel the same than Santiago. It's always a great pleasure and a great bringing knowledge and experience and common sense to everyone. So
That's always lacking.
yeah. Okay, so Anne, thank you very much for always being available for us, and see you soon.
Absolutely. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bueno, con esta última entrevista llegamos al final de la Semana de Encuentros CEAPAT 2025. Quiero agradecer a todos los y las ponentes que habéis participado, a las personas que nos habéis seguido de manera presencial o a través de nuestro canal de YouTube, y sobre todo y especialmente a los y las técnicos del CEAPAT y el personal administrativo que con su trabajo ha hecho posible que estos encuentros hayan tenido lugar un año más y hayamos llegado a todos vosotros. Así que bueno, muchísimas gracias y nos vemos dentro de un año en otra semana de encuentros. Gracias.